It's the economy, stupid. The iconic campaign slogan that carried Bill Clinton to the White House, thanks to his political strategist James Carville. A phrase so simple, so easy, so obvious, but also so powerful, because it can either galvanize or haunt a president. In the case of Joe Biden and his economy, well, it's kind of doing both. Technically, the economy is doing pretty well right now. Did you know that? Because it's true. More than 8 million new jobs have been created under Biden. More than 8 million. As the White House points out, the job market is the strongest today since the World War II era. And the Biden administration has seen the fastest decline in unemployment for any president. Any president. Investments in domestic business are up by 20% since Biden came into office. In fact, our economy may grow faster this year than China's for the first time since 1976. That is a huge deal. An annual report by the Fed conducted at the end of 2021 that surveys Americans across the country found that a higher percentage of Americans reported feeling financial well-being, which basically means feeling financially comfortable. More Americans said they had that kind of satisfaction than at any time since the survey began almost a decade ago. That's pretty significant. At least it normally would be. To cite another political campaign in 1980, Ronald Reagan posed some simple but game-changing questions in a debate with then-sitting Democratic President Jimmy Carter.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is it easier for you to go and buy things in the stores than it was 4 years ago? Is there more or less unemployment in the country than there was 4 years ago?
The answers to all of those simple questions made it clear the economy had gotten worse under Jimmy Carter. The elections were a week later, and, well, the rest is history. Under President Biden, that's not the case so far. People are, according to their own understanding, doing well. In some cases, better than they were even before the pandemic. In fact, his presidency has seen the fastest economic growth since Ronald Reagan. Biden tried to make these points in his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week before he outlined his plan for fighting inflation. And that is his biggest problem, the American economy's biggest problem, inflation. To be fair, inflation is at its highest rate in 40 years. That's no joke. But context matters. It's also a global phenomenon right now. It's not isolated to the United States. Despite all the positive metrics that would be hailed in any year under any president, it's the bill at the pump that's dictating how people feel about the economy. According to a Gallup poll from last month, 46% of adults surveyed rated the economic conditions right now as poor. Another 39% as only fair. Only 13% call the economy good. Only 13%. 1% excellent. In fact, according to Gallup, Americans are more negative about the economy than at any point since the Great Recession of 2009. More negative now than they were at the height of the pandemic in 2020, when we were losing millions of jobs every week. It's kind of insane. Just as shocking as a survey by Navigator Research in February that revealed that more people, almost 10 percentage points more, think jobs have been lost in the US over the last year than those who believe jobs have been gained, which is not true at all. But you know, it's all about the vibes. The economy feels off. We're also told, both by the Republicans and big segments of the media, that it is off. Data be damned. The Biden administration knows it has a problem where people feel the whole economy is off because prices at the pump are off. Quote, the White House has one problem that rules them all, gas prices. That was Politico's aptly titled article last week, detailing how the administration is putting a massive effort into finding ways to get gas prices down. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain has grown particularly absorbed by the issue, checking the average price of a gallon of gas every morning, they write. Could they advertise anything else? Klain rhetorically asked. A lot of parties are at fault for this. Democrats for their remarkable consistency in poor messaging, the media for its obsessive coverage with inflation over other economic stories, and Republicans, of course, for exploiting the prices at the pump and even spreading brazen lies. At a recent rally, GOP Congresswoman Lisa McClain said unemployment was at a 40-year high, which couldn't be more untrue. I guess that's right-wing partisanship for you. In fact, it goes both ways. If you look at this graph, Republican voters went from saying the economy was doing well to doing badly, literally overnight, once Biden was sworn in as president, and the reverse happened with Democratic voters. So yes, it really is the economy stupid, but the thing about that slogan is the economic reality is almost irrelevant. It matters more how people think or feel it's doing than how it's actually doing, especially in an election year. Joining me now to discuss all of this and more is a man who worked in Clinton's first administration as Labour Secretary, economist Robert Reich. He's also a professor at Berkeley and the author of the 2020 book, The System, Who Rigged It, How We Fix It, which is now available in paperback. Robert, thanks for coming back on the show. Tell us, in your view, how is the United States economy doing right now?
Mehdi, if you look at the data, the economy is doing extremely well. Look at the job growth. It's doing extremely well. Unemployment is down. The economy is growing very, very well. But inflation is the big problem. And it's not only a big problem in terms of the economy overall, it's also a big problem specifically in terms of gas and the price of gas at the pump. It's what everybody pays attention to because every single gas station has in very big numbers exactly what is happening from week to week, from day to day. So people can see. They pass the gas stations. They see what gas is costing. They put gas in their cars. They see. And those numbers haunt the economy overall. Those numbers are the most direct and palpable measures of whether the economy is under control or not.
So before we talk a bit more about inflation, I just need to put this poll up. According to a new YouGov poll, a majority of Republicans and a plurality of Democrats think we are in an economic recession right now, which is absurd. We are not. We're not anywhere close to that. Our growth has been excellent, as you pointed out, as I pointed out. How do you deal with that level of misinformation? It's not just, it's easy to say, oh, it's Republicans watching Fox. No, a plurality of Democrats think so too.
Well, one way not to deal with it, you don't want to tell people, if you are in an administration, that they're doing better than they feel that they're doing. Because there's nothing that aggravates the public more than hearing from particularly the politicians and the president who is in power, don't worry, you're really doing well, even though you don't feel like you are doing well. Now, the other problem here is that the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates at a very rapid rate. And as those interest rates rise, mortgage rates are going up. If you have a variable rate mortgage, you're paying more. You're seeing a lot of your bills, in other words, succumb not just to inflation, but also to the Fed and what the Fed is trying to do about inflation.
So last week, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on CNN that she was wrong about how long inflation would last. She had said in 2021 that it was a small risk, transitory, temporary, etc. On Friday, I spoke with Jared Bernstein, who sits on the White House Council of Economic Advisors, and he and I talked about this. Have a listen.
The consensus among economists is, in fact, that these disruptions are transitory. So every forecast is for inflation to start coming down in coming quarters.
Do you want to join with Janet Yellen and apologize for getting that analysis wrong?
No, I mean, what I said then was very much the case. And in fact, at the time, the Federal Reserve, virtually every economic forecaster, the Congressional Budget Office, were all saying what I said there.
Robert, Jared Bernstein there was deeply uncomfortable, and I asked him whether he regretted his remarks in the same way that Janet Yellen did. I wonder if there's a division within the administration, whether that's the right way to deal with this issue. Should members of the administration be kind of self-flagellating over inflation? Does that help?
No, I don't think it helps for anybody to be self-flagellating about the economy. There's so many factors, maybe, that affect how the economy is going at any given time, over which an administration has no control at all, that it's absurd to even try to predict or take credit for or take blame for. No, I think what we need to do is understand the causes of inflation and come up, and what the administration has to do is come up with some efforts, even if they're not giant efforts, even if they're not going to solve the problem, but some efforts that show the public it is really trying to solve this problem.
You were Labour Secretary under Bill Clinton, a president who had a good jobs record, came in talking about the economy stupid, even balanced the budget, which we can argue about another day whether that was always the right thing for Democrats to do. Republicans never seem to care about deficits. But just on jobs, Biden has this amazing jobs record. People don't know about it. Americans think that we lost jobs last year. We didn't gain jobs, which is bizarre to me. That's a real messaging failure. Is it, again, to come back to your opening point, is it because gas prices are there in big letters at the pump, Whereas unemployment, well, if I have a job, I'm not bothered about unemployment. I'm worried about wages. I'm worried about the cost of living.
That's part of it. But also remember, we are just back now. In fact, we're not quite back to where we were on jobs before the pandemic. So it's not as if the job situation, if your mind is where we were 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, you're not going to say, oh, things are fabulous, because 2.5 years ago, in some ways, they were even better. And so just the mere fact of having more jobs is not really the point. The real point is, are we doing better than we were before the pandemic? And I think we still have a way to go. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I find it insane that Americans think the economy is worse now than in the summer of 2020, when we were losing millions and millions of jobs a week and businesses were closed. And yet Donald Trump, okay, he lost the election, but he actually gained more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016. So I feel we made it.
Right now, let's be clear. Apart from inflation, it is doing very well. There is, though, a huge problem. Democrats are terrible at messaging in terms of getting this across.
Yes.
And
I also fear
media doesn't help. Let's put it that way.
I also fear that the whole Carville, it's the economy stupid line just doesn't apply anymore in an age of culture wars, in an age of social media polarization, in an age where, Republicans can carry an entire news cycle on Dr. Seuss or Mr. Potato Head, and jobs numbers becomes much more less salient than it was, shall I say, in the early 1990s. Shifting gears while I have you, Robert, I want to play a clip from a recent video you made on foreign influence on our elections. Let's have a watch.
The real scandal is foreign money flowing into U.S. elections, legally, through investments in American corporations. You see, corporations spent hundreds of millions of dollars to influence elections, and foreign investors now own a whopping 40% of the shares of American corporations, up from just 5% in 1982.
I feel like you have more fun making those videos than probably teaching students at Berkeley, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. You end that clip by saying Democrats should make this campaign finance reform an issue in the midterms. We're just months away from those midterms. It doesn't look like Democrats are going to make campaign finance that much of an issue.
It doesn't, does it? I still think they should, because every time the Republicans say we have a lot of fraudulent elected people who are voting, we have a lot of undocumented immigrants who are coming across the border and voting, well, there's no evidence of that at all. But what they don't say, Democrats don't say, is that in response to Republicans in particular, they never talk about the fact that there is all this foreign money coming in.
Yes.
40% of the value of American corporations is owned by foreigners, and American corporations have a duty, a fiduciary duty to respond to what their shareholders need, not to what America needs. That means that they're going to be lobbying, and they are lobbying in favor of all sorts of things that help shareholders.
I guess, Robert, one of the reasons why so many Democrats don't want to do campaign finance reform is that so many Democrats benefit from corporate money. You look at someone like Joe Manchin, a supposedly Democratic senator who's frustrated both the left and the Biden administration, blocking all the major agenda items. In the Washington Post this week, Jeff Stein and Tyler Pager write about when he went on Fox in December to derail the Build Back Better legislation that you and I have discussed so many times on the show. He turned his phone off. Joe Biden had to leave a frustrated voicemail. The president was trying to call him. And people are like, oh, what's driving Joe Manchin? I mean, it's not that big of a secret. He's funded by big industries. He's funded by Republican billionaires like Nelson Peltz. I mean, is it any surprise that someone who has that kind of funding, supported by those kind of industries, is going to block progressive legislation?
There should be no surprise at all. But here's the thing. I have been very close to the Democratic Party and involved in Democratic politics for now almost 40, I don't want to even tell you, 45 years. And this particular Democratic Congress, particularly on the Senate side, is less dependent on big corporations and Wall Street than previous Democratic Congresses I have worked with. No, it is Joe Manchin and it is Sinema and maybe one or two others, but most Democrats actually are willing to take corporations on. I mean, look at all of the interest in better and in raising corporate taxes. Let's give credit where credit is due. Manchin is the big problem. Manchin and Sinema are the big problem.
We can end on that moment of complete agreement.